glad you're here. We actually recorded this episode before the global pandemic, but the themes in this episode are control, feeling a lack of control, and even how to regain a sense of control. And the other thing we talk about is suffering. And those are things that I see everybody dealing with right now. The name Baby Yoda comes from a story that Jai tells at the end about his birth and early childhood, and it really illustrates the power of the spoken word and the power of vision. So I hope you enjoy, and thank you for being here. Hello, welcome to the Deepening place. Jai, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm feeling in control and I'm feeling good.
You're
Sleepy.
feeling in control?
Feeling in control.
That's awesome. Where did that come from?
Choice. I'm either in
Choice.
control or I'm not. So I'm going to choose to be in control. I have chosen.
You've chosen to be in control.
I've chosen.
I like it. So, what are you in control of?
Both my choices and then the perception of the ramifications of them.
Have you been meditating on that this week or?
Active meditation, I think, is probably the best way to phrase that or best way to put
Mm-hmm.
that into context. Yeah, just being very conscious of that all the time. Choice and control.
Like, I guess what I mean by something you're meditating on, sometimes you're just feeling a concept, you're just feeling it. So I didn't know if this is something you've been working on or just how you feel in the moment.
It's something I have started thinking about and working on in the past, and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
just recently come to like full fruition.
Okay. Last episode, we talked a little bit about the concept of karma, like you reap what you sow, or what you give, you will get, that kind of thing. You were saying that, as comforting as it is to think that if you put good things out there, you'll get good things back. I think I wrote this down. You said a lot of it's scary, the stuff outside of us. We were talking about how you can't control the things outside of you. And you were talking about there are a lot of big, terrifying decisions made with big budgets. And you're happy that karma works, but you're very aware of what you can't change. Did you want to say anything more about that?
I actually, I guess, faced that idea again this week. I was talking to a friend and a colleague about the upcoming election, and more importantly, like I guess the Democratic primary happened the other
Mm-hmm.
day, and we're able to have very civil conversations. But even in that conversation, it was sort of on the edge of, well, why don't you really care, Jai? Why didn't you watch the he was asking
The
me why I
debate.
didn't watch why I didn't watch the debate. And he came up again. I was like, I don't have any I don't have any control what these people will actually decide. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I guess I can respect it as a civic duty or responsibility, as they say. But I don't care about those debates, and a lot of them aren't even intellectually valid. So building from the last episode, yeah, I'm still in that space of feeling I'm in control of me, but I can't control that, and I am personally at a struggle of, even though I can control my vote, which somewhat represents my voice, I guess, it's not really my control in that. I'm just clicking a button, or that's how I feel, at least. I'm just clicking a button or giving a nod to someone else who's ultimately going to have the control.
I think it's interesting that you kind of set some boundaries for yourself as far as how to protect your energy, so to speak, and choose not to engage with the debate. Because to your point, if you really felt like you were going to learn something, or there was more than just, showboating or playing games, if you really thought you were going to learn something about someone's stance or their sincerity or the issues, it would be different. But to just refuse to kind of play the game to protect yourself and your energy, you got some pushback from somebody on that. I think that's interesting.
Yes, Have you experienced that before?
Yeah, in probably different ways, but I was speaking the other day, and one of the things that came up was protecting yourself politically right now. And I have so many clients that come in with just severe anxiety, and it's just fueled by the craziness of our current politics. And so I usually tell them, you got to cut it off for a while. Limit the time you spend with it. Also, be very discerning about your source. And anybody who's trying to make you afraid is manipulating you. So try to find a source that's more reporting facts and limit the time you spend with it. And then I think the last thing was to also, if you're listening to podcasts or any other, like following people on social media, try to find people that are for something as opposed to against something. And those are good ways to kind of preserve your energy and keep you from spiraling into anxiety. I learned that one from Mother Teresa, actually. She said, I'm not going to march against anything, but I will march for something. It's a very subtle difference, but if you consider what your values are and what you believe in and what you hold dear, find people that are for those things. And it's such a life affirming and valuable way as opposed to always just filling your head with someone who's against something.
That's awesome. And for me, that ties right back into control. You can control that when you're for something. You're actively putting energy into, I guess, making something happen or
Yeah.
making a change. And the opposite is not control. You're fighting because I guess you don't. That's why you protest something. Hmm.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You mentioned you started off with control. How do you control yourself and how do you keep yourself from allowing your mind to be filled with who's got the the key to the nuclear? In other words, who can make the big decisions, and that being so far out of our control? How do you solve that in your own life?
In my own life, waking up with a sense of purpose, that's how it began. And so what that looks like now is living out that purpose and really ignoring the noise outside of that. For me, it is in a spiritual context. Some people would translate that to religious context, or in a fiscal sense, you could even put it into what you're doing for work every day, or how and or why you're making money. But it really goes into what are you waking up for? For me, what am I waking up for every day, and then what's a distraction from that? So what are those
Mhm.
in my life right now? Focus on being healthy with my family, healthy
Yeah.
with my girlfriend, healthy with my personal friendships, and really fortifying those, and then really healthy in the good works I'm leaving here on Earth. Outside of that, and maybe very few other things, if a thought literally comes up in my head that either bumps with those things or puts them in a negative context or a space that I don't need to explore, it's a very active, conscious decision to A, recognize that I'm having them, and B, that I don't want it to be there, and then just switch my mode.
Wow, I like that.
Quite hard. So that's the mental side of it. And physically, how do I do that with the control? I plan out more of my time. That's what I've learned. I've had to do for myself as well. Really
Mm.
structure my days more. That helps a lot as well. And trust that.
Do you mean like having a routine or just having enough going on?
Having enough going on more than routine.
Okay. That's really interesting. I talk to people a lot about the the archetypes of king, warrior, magician, and lover, and establishing your vision and not allowing anything that exalts itself against your vision. That's very king energy you're dealing with there. To your point, it's very very hard to do, but if the thought comes up and you can judge it, is this in keeping with my vision or not? And if it's not in keeping with your vision, you ask it to keep on moving on. It takes a lot of discipline and work to stay in that space.
Is that something you see in your clients a lot, or deal with your clients or yourself?
that vision work is some of the initial work that I do with people, and I know for myself it's made a huge difference. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named Carlton Pearson. He's a
No, I haven't.
old kind of evangelist guy. One time, probably in my early 20s, I had the opportunity to hear him live. He was just electric. But he said that vision is one of those things that you get, and it's there and it's golden and it's beautiful and you're psyched up about it. And then he said you get pulled back into the present and then you have to walk it out. And that vision, that visual stayed with me forever. And that's sometimes, between you and your vision, there might be a swamp or there might be a desert place or there might be a whatever, but your vision is always there on the horizon and you always have that to walk toward. And that's kind of like what we were talking about last week. When you're going toward your vision and you end up 2 miles due east, you realize you missed the mark. And so you correct and get going again. So last week, we were talking about that I did not write the prayer of St. Francis. And so the funny thing is that the thing that I was saying was not even the prayer of St. Francis, it was the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I think that kind of goes along with what we were saying before. The serenity to accept what I can't change, courage to change what I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that's credited to Reinhold Niebuhr. I actually looked up the prayer of St. Francis too, so I thought I would read it. It says, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to new life. I thought there was a lot of good stuff there too, like how we talked about when you get it right within your own heart, that love starts flowing out. And talking about you and your neighbor being interested in community and doing things for the community and solving real problems and pouring your life into other people's lives. And I felt like that kind of summed that up really nicely.
I agree. I haven't heard that prayer in a long time.
It's an oldie but goodie.
I was right back to karma.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about suffering this week. I don't know if it was maybe to do with how we ended the episode, but just my heart has been so big this week for people who are in the midst of suffering. And I don't know if we've mentioned this so far on the podcast, but we've both talked about how we'd love to eventually have people ask questions that we can answer on air and discuss and get to the bottom of. So I wanted to say if anybody's interested in submitting a question based on something that we talk about here, on my website at angelaabad.com, there's a contact form that has a place where you can write. So we would love to have anybody ask a question, and in the future, when we get our mugs going, we'll give you a coffee mug.
Get
So
one.
right now it might be the Amazon gift card, but in the future we can look forward to having your own Deepening Place coffee mug. So this week's question, I had posted something online, so it was from a previous episode. This was on my Instagram account. It says, reject the extremes of fear and judgment. Learn to love yourself. Be empowered to go and love the world. And then my comment on that was, once we get to the point where we can love ourselves, that love then flows out of us to the people around us, family, friends, community, and ultimately the world. People make a mistake being so focused on what's wrong with the world outside of them not really understanding that they have the power and authority to actually change the world through love. So that was the quote. And then the person submitted the question, and this broke my heart a little bit. Do you think there's a difference in loving yourself and loving your life? Can you love yourself truly but hate your life and situation?
Ooh, can you love yourself but hate your life?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Expound on that a little bit.
Well, especially thinking from the context of, let's just take a child, for example, a child in like a really horrible situation. So I've worked with students that love themselves for sure, but are in horrific situations or are getting out of horrific situations. So just to answer their question in a very direct way, yes, I know people that have been like that, and I think at times I can personally resonate with it, and not in like the people around me were so much bad, but that the situation, I was good with myself, but there's really no changing what was going on. It just sucked. Life just wasn't that great. And sometimes I know that it's really hard to dig deep and find out that there is some glimmer of hope in your life, that you can, or love yourself and not love your life. A really smart professor once taught me that even with his hardest clients, he was like a social worker, and even with his most difficult clients, eventually after digging, there is something that you can love about your life. There is something. So I would put an asterisk on that person's question. Yes, and or yes, but there is a way to dig down and find something. Because I think if you love yourself, once again, this goes back to spirituality for me, but if you love yourself, there's some reason you're alive. There's some
Yeah.
reason you're still here to process that thought. So there's something still keeping you here, you know. How about you? What came up for you when you read that?
Mm, just my little blurb answer was yes, there is a difference. Some seasons in life are miserable, and it would be unreasonable to love those times. But treating yourself like someone you care about, loving yourself through the misery is grace. I talk to my clients sometimes about the you in footsie pajamas. And what I mean by that is we all have these inner children that just need so much tender love and care. And we drive ourselves so hard. And sometimes just taking a moment to consider that inner you in footsie pajamas that needs a hug, that just needs to be held, that just needs a warm beverage, that just needs to rest. And having that grace on yourself in the midst of a storm, allowing yourself to take a moment. It doesn't solve it, but it makes it. It's just a little moments of comfort in the midst of it. I like what you said, that practice of gratitude, finding something even in the midst of a really tough time. Sometimes it's air. I don't know if you've ever been to that point where you're like, okay, um, I can breathe.
Dig deep.
Sometimes
Yeah.
there's always something that you can be grateful for, and that gratitude really has a shift. It shifts the energy in a positive direction. So not solving it, loving your little inner children's not going to solve it, but both of those things are like medicine, I guess, in the midst of a really tough time.
Mm, yes. Yes. I like that question. There's a lot to explore there.
We could probably sit with that for a while. I was thinking about too, when I have something really unpleasant, like, say, for example, a root canal. That's the example that I came up with. I have a way of surviving those times because I get really, whenever something like that is happening to me, I feel very childish. I feel like my feelings are hurt. I feel like I'm going to fall apart and not be able to make it. And so I will try to get really centered within myself, and I will just repeat over and over, at 5:30 you'll be safe. At 5:30 you'll be in your home. At 5:30, I just pick a time that's well beyond, and I know that I'll be done by then, and I'll just try to comfort myself in that way. I think sometimes putting your eyes back on your vision, like, yes, I am in the middle of the swamp, but even something like, the second half of my life will not be like the first, and just repeating that to yourself. I don't know if that sounds like magical thinking or not, but that has gotten me through some really tough times too.
Not magical thinking at all. I've done that and do that myself. What's the phrase? This too shall pass. There are situations I can think of where it doesn't necessarily apply, and it does tie back to that person's question. But overall, I find that especially once you hit a certain place in life where you kind of are either on your own or making your own decisions. If you get to that point, then what you were just explaining, I think, is incredibly useful and practical. Whatever you're, I'll just say, tripping about or scared of, or legitimately will experience pain through, it's gonna be over.
It's hard to see that sometimes.
Yes, indeed it is. Indeed it is. It's really hard to see. What helps you see it? Can you kind of, what's been your journey with that? How did you get to that point?
I think for me, contemplation has been a real lifesaver. And even to this day, I have a lot of anxiety. I will just allow myself to get centered again and look at it, try to love myself in a way and be compassionate toward myself. Music helps me a lot. I've just discovered, is it Spotify? I needed something where I could make playlists. And so now I have like a sad playlist and a mad playlist. So when I'm feeling that way, it's comforting to me to just let that part of me be expressed through music and just sit with it for a while and just let it feel what it feels. And you can't always do that, but I do think that's a compassionate way of dealing with those feelings, just allowing them to be what they are and not always trying to power through.
Yes, sit back and feel sometimes, which is
Yeah.
scary, especially in
Yeah.
the context of not having this tool that we're talking about, of knowing it's going to pass.
So just holding the space for that is helpful. I got a question for you. You said last time I mentioned that I felt like I knew about you that you'd done a lot of good spiritual work, and you said I don't really see myself that way. And that really struck me because I feel like everything you say, kind of points to that. Do you not see that about yourself, or
That I'm highly spiritual.
yeah, that you've done your inner work? I mean, based on like where you've come from and what you've endured and your ability just to be so balanced and calm and accepting and loving. I just feel like you have done some really deep work to reconcile all of that within your own heart.
Do I see it that way? Yes and no. The no part is because I've come to realize so much of it was done at a young age. And that's based on like reflection and feedback with my family on just how long I've been like a kind of a calm centered person. Same with my girlfriend. One of her favorite attributes of mine is that I'm calm. I'm centered. Like she struggles with or she lives with bipolar disorder, so it's very grounding for her. So the no part is I think I was working on it or maybe born with it or something so long ago that I wasn't even in a frame of mind that that was something people could work on. And the yes part would be that as I've become aware, like as you pointed out, and thank you for pointing it out, the more I'm around people that are trying to work on themselves spiritually and live in that dimension, I do realize I have some tools and experiences that people are either trying to gain or trying to find or something along those lines. So very recently the answer would be yes, and by recently I mean in the last probably 3 years or so was I aware of, I guess, a spiritual tool set, and it's like this soul experience, like this way of going through life very recently. And even some days I'm still like, I don't know, man. Y'all say I've done all this work, but to me, it still is kind of, I don't know. I'm not saying it to. I'm just, let me be truthful with it. It just feels natural, so it's hard for me to pick up on it. I think it's both a blessing and a curse. There's some like downsides to that sometimes, for sure. For the most part, it's just kind of how I've operated since literally since I can remember.
What you're saying is you were born like a baby Yoda.
You know, you know. So my mom. Can I tell you a short story that's gonna answer your
Yeah.
point? Like you just said, my mom's brother, one of her brothers, Uncle Narcisse. Uncle Narcisse, last just this past summer, he was telling the whole family a story about me being born. Right, I'm the oldest grandchild on that side of the family, and there's a
Uh-huh.
good amount of grandkids. Right, when I was being born, my great grandmother, which is Uncle Narcisse's grandmother, which is my mom's grandmother. When I was born, they said I would be the first black president. My mom said Jai is going to be like the greatest. You know, he's going to be this, he's going to be that. And they immediately started entering me into like, oh man, you name it, any talent pageant, just
Mhm.
everything from birth. And this is how the family talked about me, all the way from like my great grandmother, very very matriarchal like side of the family. Before I can remember, this is how they treated me and talked about me, and how they're very religious family as well though. So this is like how they prayed about me and whatnot too. So some of that I attribute to that. I feel blessed because that's what my family bestowed upon me. That's the wishes that they had, and
That was their vision for you.
that was a vision for me at the time. That was a vision. You know, a lot of us hadn't gone to college or school, and a whole lot of things that like generationally the family hadn't been through yet. Not that it was all put on my head, but I was the one of like the first, like I said, the oldest grandkid. So I guess have that vision for everything. So he tells a story now, and he's like, if you had met us back then, you'd have thought Jai was Jesus. He can tell the story, but it sounds ridiculous, and they all laugh and they're like, yeah, that was true. That's exactly how it was until you were like 6 or 7. That's how everyone talked about it, like constantly.
Wow, Jai, that is such a powerful story, you know? What if we did that to all the babies,
Yes,
you
yes.
know?
Hmm.
That would be amazing.
That's how I. Yes, thank you for saying that. That's exactly how I see it. That's what I've taken away from it. There's power in your name. There's power in how you speak on children, and power in how you speak to children and speak about people. And I'm saying children because if people are seeing these tools in me now as a 32, almost 33-year-old man, like I said, a lot of this started way back then before I could even form words. Like a lot of these tools were just given in because that's what my family expected.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's really, really powerful what people are speaking over you and what you absorb at a young age and how it kind of sets your brain. So, that's really a cool story.
Oh, thanks. Did it answer your question though? Okay.
Yeah, all I know is that I might name this episode Baby Yoda. And and if you ever get to the White House, I've always wanted to be the spiritual director for a president. So I'm just putting that out there. At least a
Cool.
visit to the Lincoln Room, you know,
That's
just
it. All right. All right.
well, I hope you have a wonderful week.
You too. I'm glad we're doing this. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
listening.
All right, talk to you soon.
Okay. Talk
Goodbye,
to you soon.
everybody.